goal of this podcast is to help you break in and thrive in advertising. And we do that every week by sharing the stories and advice of those rocking it on the other side. And welcome back to ADjunct, the segment where we listen to the best advice from the best advertising educators in the world. This week, we simulate what it's like to be an advertising student at the University of Florida. And we learn directly from Dan Windels. Dan is an advertising instructor at the University of Florida College of Journalism and Communications, in fact. We know University of Florida is regarded as a top 5 public university in the country. So you know he has to have the credibility and the ability to teach there. A few things I love about this conversation. First, Dan started his advertising break-in as a 32-year-old intern at GSD&M in Austin after receiving his master's at University of Texas at Austin, which I find incredible. So, hey, if you're in your early 20s, you just know you have plenty of time and are ahead of the game. And you can be 40, 50, 60 years old, and there's still time to break into this field. Also, I love that Dan is an expert in the strategy and account side of this business. We discuss many great pieces of tangible job searching advice, from LinkedIn best practices to delivering value to people 3 to 5 years into their agency careers. That's a sweet spot we kind of discuss, and other fantastic career search strategies that are easy to digest and you can apply today. You might not even finish this episode. You might just go and hop onto LinkedIn and get started, but make sure you come on back. And also, Dan mentioned our Crowbar Awards, so thank you, Dan. It's our ongoing creative competition. We have a new brief live all year round with a new creative challenge and guest judge to pick the best campaign. Hey, you can enter now and see the current brief and the judge for a chance to win the Crowbar, the coveted blue Crowbar. And you'll get to come on the show with the guest judge to talk about your campaign. You can find out all about that at www.crowbarawards.com. I think it's 3 W's. Now on with the show. This is the Breaking and Entering Advertising Podcast Adjunct Edition. And as usual, I'm your accomplice, Gino Schellenberger. Kick it, Mikey. All right, Dan Windels, welcome to the Breaking and Entering Advertising Podcast. How are you doing today?
I am doing amazing. Thanks, Gino. I appreciate you having me on.
Where are you located right now? Where are you sitting?
I am in Gainesville, Florida, at the University of Florida. I always tell people, if you look at a map of the state of Florida and think of all the places you want to visit, we are not there. But we are in a wonderful college town in the center of North Central Florida.
And where are you from? Where'd you grow up?
I grew up primarily on the West Coast, a little bit everywhere, but most of my school years, including college, were in the state of Oregon.
And we'll talk about that. Well, we're going to talk about University of Florida. Great school, phenomenal ad program, phenomenal at everything. It seems like just a great institution overall. This episode, what are we going to talk about, Dan? I think we're going to break this down into a couple parts here. First part, we're going to talk about University of Florida. I want to know what it's like to go there. I want to live vicariously through an ad student. What do they go through? What do you teach them? What are there tracks? We'll get into that. And then I want to kick it to you, give you some credibility, talk about your story. And then we'll wrap it up there. And once you get back to academia and you're breaking there, we'll get into your vision, your advice. Because not everybody can afford school. Not everybody goes to such a great institution. So we're giving them advice for free right now. This is a college class right now. So sound good, Dan? Anything you want to add in there for structure?
No, that sounds good to me. Let's go.
All right. Ad program, first off, what do you teach? What are you rocking over there?
So I teach strategy, a class in branding, a qualitative research class that I've affectionately named cultural branding. And I also am in charge of all of our interns. So a lot of our students will get 4 credit internships, and we try to put some structure around that and maximize their learning opportunity while they're at agencies or whatever company they're working at.
Got it. And it's worth noting, I think this differentiation for our adjunct listeners, they know that there are PhD, tenured track professors, assistant professors, like this route of research, right?
Correct.
And
Yes.
that's what you are, right?
So, not exactly.
Got it.
No, that's a good question. So, we are broken up largely into tenure track professors, which you mentioned, people with PhDs, people that teach advertising classes, but also spend about half their time doing research. I'm not on that track. I am hired as an industry professional or a lecturer is my non-academic or my non-PhD title, if you will, and
Mhm.
I bring in industry experience, and that sort of complements what the PhD people are doing in the program.
Super important to have a balance of both of those in a department. It's a good sign of a good school, good ad program. Having the balance of those who are in the industry, maybe doing some side projects currently to stay fresh and stay in tune with what's going on. We'll talk about that, and then also having those research heavy folks, those theories, and then turning them into applications. And I was always like a bigger fan of the instructor side, but that's okay. I didn't say that out loud. Both are super important. And you'll notice on this show that I have a lot of instructors because, um, you know, I always enjoyed them. They got me jobs, it seemed like. And I'm sure you're that person too at the
Those,
university because you have those connections. You know what's going on. You worked at agencies, you worked at a bunch of great places. But tangent aside, what does the program look like? I'm a freshman and I know I want to study advertising, and I chose Florida because I wanted to get out of the Midwest. Walk me through this. What are my options? Bright Eyed, Gainesville, Gate. What's the Tom Petty is playing on campus.
yeah, the infamous "Won't Back Down," which is
Mhm.
our between third and fourth quarter song at
That's
the
playing all the time on
at
campus, I imagine.
Ben Hill Griffin Stadium. Correct. So yeah, our advertising program is pretty large. We have between 600 and 700 students each
Holy
year,
cow!
and it's broken largely up into 2 tracks. I say that largely because students can certainly take individual electives that give them specialty areas,
Mhm.
but we have what's called the agency track, which, as you can probably guess, is more about prepping students for working in advertising agencies. We also identified that there were a lot of students that didn't want to go that route necessarily, and they might want to work in some communication space, but not at an ad agency. So we have a different track that's called persuasive messaging. We could
Ooh.
talk. um, we've had some debate about that name, but the larger point is that not every student wants to get into the agency world, and so we will try to give them options within that. So that's how it largely breaks down, and then we have a wide range of classes that students. There's some core classes, and then of course classes they can select to sort of amplify a certain specialty, if you will.
So I know I'm not going down the persuasive messaging track. And can you just real quick, can you with the mic, can you make sure that it's like in front, it's a little muffled, like maybe a little bit closer? Just want to make sure our listeners are
There we
good.
go.
Yeah.
How about right
Oh
there?
yeah.
There we go.
That's golden. That's
Nice.
golden. Thank you, Dan. I know I'm not going to go down the persuasive messaging track. Is that what it was called? But
Correct. Nailed
what are some of the potential outcomes? Where are they getting jobs at?
those people largely get jobs working on the communication side of a business, right? So it could be anything from working at a university. So we have a large communication department at the University of Florida. We have branding, we have television spots, we do everything that
Wow.
that a big brand does. It could be working at within a marketing department,
Mhm.
more on the communication side and sort of amplifying what the people with the business degrees bring to the table. So that's
So
more of the persuasive messaging side.
and what about public relations? And where does that fall in the mix?
So we have an entire public relations department. So we are the
That's different.
Yeah, and they have about 6 to 700 students, and they are in our building as well. So
Now get them out of here. No, I'm just kidding. I had a PR minor, and I actually do I'm in a weird situation where I do PR for an ad agency. It's awesome. I'm actually, my route was advertising major, but I technically fit into that persuasion structure, but I got into the agency world doing that. So for all those people that like the persuasion comms marketing side, there are roles within agencies that do that, and you still get the benefits of being in a creative atmosphere. You get involved in some of the work, you get to pitch and brainstorm. So there it is like a hybrid role. So that is a potential outcome too.
yeah, and I mean, a lot of our courses are very similar in advertising and PR. I mean, the big picture structure of both of those majors that is a lot of the same components, right? It's what is your business problem? What is the research? How does that lead to strategy? And then what are your creative outcomes that you're going to do? So there is some overlap, but we largely separate the students into one or the other. They can take classes that overlap, but more or
Sure.
less they're going to be in one, either PR or advertising.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And then within advertising, you have the two routes. You have
We have
agency,
the
non-agency.
we have the two routes, and within that, we're building certificate programs, which is a way of trying to help guide our students down common tracks within the advertising industry. So we're bringing on board a portfolio sequence, so the creative track, if you will. So students take their core advertising classes, and then in their senior year, we'll supplement those with very creative intensive courses. We're in the
Get those
development.
portfolios
Yes,
tightened
exactly.
up.
It's not a portfolio school yet. We don't have the full range that a full portfolio school has, but we're bringing on courses each year with the goal of getting very close to that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's really up to the students. Like even in some of these universities, even at portfolio schools, a lot of it is extra work. If you know you want to be an art director or copywriter, these are two main positions, even strategy now. I mean, you're going to have to put in extra work outside the classroom. It's just the expectation. Like the bar is getting so high on from agencies on what they're looking for when they're hiring juniors. You just have to know, like, you have to make every opportunity in every classroom great. And I always recommend pushing back on the professor or the instructor and raise your hand and say, like, this brief is great. Can I tweak it this way? Can I work on it? Can I take this route? I think that because your time is so important because you're gonna have to make that up. So, and I'm sure you're one of those instructors that is cognizant of this, and you're making sure the opportunities, if they're interested in art direction or copywriting, you're making the projects bookable, meaning that they can put it in their book.
Sort of. I mean, I within the classes I teach, there's only so much I can do. I mean, I teach largely strategy and branding classes that have creative components, but if I have a student that's very much wants to go that route, I'm going to certainly direct them towards our classes that are
Yeah, and
intensely
and
creative.
but first they need to know that.
Yes.
And that's so important to know that and have that awareness. The goal of this podcast is to let people know what job they want first and foremost. Because if
I
they
think
don't know, then they can't pivot and they can't customize their college experience.
I think that's an amazing point. I've noticed in the time that I've been teaching that there is often an assumption that undergraduate students, when they say they want to work in advertising, they know all of the departments and they know exactly where they want to go. And there's no reason they should know that, right? I mean, that's, you're as a high school person, you're not getting into the weeds of that. And it's up to
No.
us to help, showcase the different avenues they can go in and help them find
Mhm.
whatever their passion is and get them
And the
down that
goal, and
route.
that should be as early as possible. So that intro class, whatever it might be, that should be probably one of the main goals. Like, here is the structure, here's the different departments, here are the different roles, here are what they do. That should be at the foundation. So then they go, oh, I do resonate, and that's what we did. And I always went this account track. It's like
Yes.
I'm not thinking all day. It sounds awful, and
Yeah.
that's scary stuff. I was like, I'm good on that. But I had that line of sight and I had that clear vision, which was really important.
Yep. Yeah, we have a principles of advertising class, which is essentially the introductory class. And that is a class that certainly goes through all of those areas. Oftentimes, I think it takes that second or third class in advertising for
Hmm.
students to really find that this is the direction they want to go. When it's given to you and you're going to be tested on a multiple choice exam, it might not, go right to your soul that you want to be a strategist
That's
or a
my
media
dream.
planner.
That is literally my dream, is to teach that intro class and then maybe a capstone class, which I'm curious if you guys do that. I talked with another professor who does that. She starts with them at first and then sees how they grow and like is that instructor as well. That's like one of my dream like career goals is to inspire them early on. And it's not about me. So tell me more about the structure. Then your classes are the branding, which is the foundations of advertising. You're working on a creative track of some sort
So we
or
have a
extras.
Yep, we have a creative track, and we're also building in an account management and strategy track. I think certificate is actually the word that is the more accurate term for academia.
Sure.
Um, but yes, so I brought an account management class online about 2 years ago here, and
Nice.
we've had you know, a wonderful response to that. Students are really, we're finding our students as they graduate are much more certain of the direction they want to go,
That's
which
great.
again is the ultimate goal, right? You can't go to an advertising agency and say, I want to work here, right? Because the response is going to be where, and it's not up to an agency to find a place for you. It's up for
You're
you
right.
to tell that agency where you really want to be. And so
Hmm.
we're bringing more and more of these courses on that are um, trying to encourage students to find that track, so they're excited and they have a portfolio of work, whether it's on the account side or the creative side or the media side,
Right.
that they
Because
can
then you
show.
can customize and you can take these specific certificate tracks courses that help you specialize and ideally be able to do the job when you graduate.
Correct.
You want to walk
Exactly.
in there knowing what to do. You're gonna learn a lot, but they want to be comfortable in an interview that okay, I can trust Dan with this entry level role, and I'm sure you guys do that. We just hired Aiden. I gotta give her a shout out. Aiden Gorenberg. She was on the PR track at Havas Chicago, and she started a couple months ago, and she is phenomenal. She's telling us what to do. She's just
That's
rocking and rolling. She's
love.
the confidence and the voice we needed within our little comms team in Havas, North America, and she just steps right up, and
I,
that's why we hired her.
Another Gator in Chicago, always good news. I like it.
Gator. Well, she actually started in Chicago, but she got hired in New York. She started with me, and I go, it's not. Yeah, I'm like, don't get used to me. I'm like, it's not this bad all the time working with me. You got a great team in New York.
Right.
Yeah, just as a joke there, but I did feel bad that she had on board with me. But great. So then, tell me about senior year. Um, is there a capstone class? What's going on? How are you guys prepping these kids, these young adults, to get
So
these full time jobs?
yeah, we do have a capstone class, which I think is very similar to a lot of other universities in that it's typically an advertising campaigns class. So
Is it 16 or 8 weeks?
we have our 16-week semesters. So they are given a client at the start of the semester with a real business problem. They have to do the research. They have to come up with the strategy. They have to come up with
Group them
creative
up,
solutions. Yep. Come up with a media
present at
plan.
the end. So it's a 16-week class?
It's 16. We have two 16-week semesters that we operate under. And so they'll start if
We did ours 8 weeks.
so that's probably a quarter system where when I
The
was at the
We had 8 and 16 weeks, and the capstone was an 8 week.
there we
Unless
go.
I'm completely botching it, but I'm pretty sure this was years ago now. Getting old.
Yeah, different
Pretty sure.
universities run things a little in different ways, but ours is structured around an entire semester.
Got
And
it.
that's designed to take all the individual skills. So they'll take an individual strategy class. They'll take hopefully the account management class once we get that up as a certificate.
Hmm.
They'll take a media class. They may or may not take creative depending if they're in that track.
Yeah.
But then when they get to campaigns, they get to put it all together, right? And that's the
Yeah.
ultimate test of can you
Right.
do it from start to finish and give a solid recommendation that hits on all the areas that are needed for
And do you
a
teach that, or is that somebody else?
I have taught that class in the past. I
Mhm.
found a home in doing some other classes, but one of the things that I really loved about the University of Florida when I came here, there were very specific things that I knew from my time in the agency world, and there was a lot I didn't in terms of academia. And the person that hired me said, look, just think of this as a big pizza, and you're just one slice, and just bring what you have. And so we have a lot of professors and instructors that have different areas of specialty, much like an agency.
Yeah, yeah.
And we all bring that together to try to give our students the most well-rounded experience. I, I've never worked at length in media. It's not something that I would consider myself an expert in.
No,
So
so
we
you're not
have
going to be
somebody,
teaching. You're not
yeah,
going to be teaching media
yep,
classes as it's how it should be.
oh, yeah.
So
It,
that's great. Um, Understood. But I think I'd be remiss and foolish not to mention the agency at the University of Florida. Are you involved in the agency?
I'm an advisor at the agency. They are,
I think about a couple minutes here. Just tell us about the agency, why it's so great, what it is, how it differs. Just give me a rundown, real high level, of what this is and why it's so great.
so the agency is an experiential or immersion option within our college. So it gives students hands-on experience. It literally is an agency within a university. It tries to replicate a business environment to the extent possible. One of the ways they do that is by working with real clients. So the agency partners with clients or partners with agencies, with other agencies, to supplement work that they need help with. Perhaps they need a little more insight into Gen Z, for example. As
Yeah,
a college
makes
campus,
sense.
we can do qualitative research and help out
Easily.
that. And so with that, students are applied to that, and they're assigned positions just like a normal advertising agency. They might be an accounts person or a strategy or a creative person. And
So it's a class, you're getting credit for this, or is this extracurricular?
it is both. So
Okay.
it can be purely extracurricular. Obviously, a lot of students with the time commitment want to get credit for it, and so there is like an independent study or credit option for that as well.
Gotcha.
But
You
some
can
students,
make things happen.
yeah, some students might only have the time to do a few hours a week, and so they're doing it as more of the extracurricular. Some others are
Nice.
going to be, deep in the weeds and spending a lot of time there, and they're going to get credit.
Well, you get a lot of recognition. That program, the agency, which is this agency, I think, um, gets a lot of recognition on this podcast. Um, Mark Beal at Rutgers has nothing but nice things to say about it. Calls it like the prototype of like how it should be at most universities. So I think that's worth mentioning. And I know that there's some other universities do it for a class fully, and you have to. It's a certain amount of. It's like an elective. I know like where I went to school, we just had the large AAF, and it was just this one huge club with 500 people in it, and that was purely extracurricular, run by the students. So this model is super interesting as well. I'm always curious to see how these things operate, and I love how you guys create these reports like these Gen Z profiles. I believe these studies that you do make so much sense. And that really hits at those aspiring researchers, um, all levels of roles and with that advertising as well. But definitely research and strategy seem to me like from those studies you do seem super, super beneficial.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about the agency here is just that it's completely staffed with professionals. So the people that are leading it at all touch points are people that are either actively in the industry and on full time now doing the agency, or people like myself who have worked in the industry and
You
are
got a lot of
helping
those
it.
instructors, and you have full-time people, right, that are allocated that are just doing this for the most part, right? Or maybe teaching a class here or there.
We have two full-time people
Which is
that's
great.
all
That's
they do.
all they're doing. You're getting
Yes.
all this guidance, you're getting the structure, the procedures, the back end BS that, when I ran my student club that I didn't want to do like the Excel sheets and budgeting and like I don't know, maybe there's people that like doing that, but we're in advertising.
Right. Yeah, and
That's
it's
probably what they're there for.
yeah, and the students get great experience. Great experience. The stuff that I hear out of the agency that is the most rewarding is just being thrown in the heat of a conference call with a client, right? Like
Bring it.
that's something you just don't get in the classroom. To have a client come back and challenge everything that you bring to the table,
And
right?
it's so great that they have a safe environment to do so. They
Yep.
can propose the craziest idea of all time, and the client could go berserk and be pissed off. And the worst case scenario, the client could say, "I'm never working with the agency again. I'm done with the University of Florida." The student's fine.
Yeah. Well,
Student's
and
fine. No, the student's not getting fired or getting expelled. Hopefully, I mean,
it's
life goes on, and that's where you test it and you push the boundaries.
it's a great point. Our people down in the agency that work there do a really good job bringing on board clients, getting them to understand that here's what you can get
Mhm.
out of students. Here's what you
They
can't.
filter it
Yeah.
nicely, but if
Well,
I was a student, I would bring hell. Knowing what I know now of that environment, and I wanna make sure students know this too on any sort of project or portfolio work, go and give them hell and go crazy and push the ideas bigger and bolder than you could ever imagine. 10x that too, because this is where you can. You don't
yeah.
have an internal review system and layers of bureaucracy and actual paychecks and funding, and your salary is dependent upon your cautious ideas. You don't have that in the university.
One of the things that I would just build on that I think is a great learning opportunity is the agency helps students find their voice. It is really unnerving when you go through life to all of a sudden enter the workforce or enter the job market and realize you can't sit there and be quiet. Like you need to participate. You need to have an opinion. And
Yeah.
to the extent possible, we structure our classes and the agency as well is to really helping students find that voice, to not be afraid to speak up, to not be afraid to say, "Hey, I don't know, but I'll get you the answer and get back to you."
Oh, yeah, I say that
And
all the time, and sometimes I don't get back, but that's okay. At least I said I'll work on it.
exactly. So,
That's why your students are better than I. But
um,
I love that point though.
yeah, and that's to me, that's one of the most exciting things about teaching is you mentioned earlier about seeing that intro person at principals and then
Mhm.
catch them again at the end on the capstone class.
And they're
The
pros.
the transition to see the confidence and this is a business where you're not expected to know the answer. You're expected to work towards solving the problem. And just to see that confidence build and to see them as seniors be ready to ask really smart questions of a client where a client's like, oh my gosh, I don't know. That's a great question. That's
Stuff.
when you know you're ready, right? That's when you
Yeah.
know that you're going to do well in a job interview, when you have that confidence to kind of hold your own, to speak up, to ask questions, to respond well to questions. That's a really exciting part of this job.
I bet. I'm jealous. Um, Got it. So let's get into some credibility and what you did to get here. When did you decide you wanted to make ads or be in this marketing communication storm? How old were you? What were you thinking? Where were you? What were you
Uh,
wearing? What were you
I
eating at the time?
My favorite way of starting this story is that I was a 32-year-old intern at an ad agency. So
Ah, okay.
I had a previous career working in film, and I stepped away from that. I went to the University of Texas in around 30 years old to get a master's degree. I
Gotcha.
was always super curious about people, and someone handed me this book. Was it Truth, Lies, and Advertising, the John
John
Steele
Steele.
book? And
Yep.
that was back when it came out, I think. And I just thought it was amazing. And I wrote a check to the University of Texas at Austin as a 30-year-old, went through a 2-year program there, and was seriously the oldest intern at my first job.
That's awesome. All
So
because of the absence of the product in the Got Milk ad,
there, there we go. Exactly.
the John Steele novel. Goodby
Yes.
Silverstein, like lead strategist at the time, did the Got Milk and some other amazing campaigns. But you said F this or sorry, I swore. You said, excuse me, I'm done with film. And you read this book and you decided to go to UT Austin, which is a great program. A lot of our professors, they have a good PhD program specifically as well. But you took the master's route because you already had all this experience from film production. I'm sure like some of those creative concepts were deep within or probably acted upon within your past career. So you're like, this is the master's is probably the right route to go.
It was. It's so ironic because in film, I worked on numerous commercials. Never in the ever thought I would be on the side of helping create those. I was just lighting
Right.
commercials.
Right. Right.
But
Right.
at the University of Texas, they had a degree in strategy, and so I focused on that, and then transitioned. When I was in that program, I got an internship, and
So where at? Did you want to get into academia or were you trying to get into agency
agency.
life?
I was
Okay.
at
So
agency. My first internship was at GSD&M in Austin,
great
Texas,
agency. Yeah.
and I remember, uh, applying and walking in and having probably what was seemed like a 3-hour interview, just talking about people, and it just I loved it, and I mean, I was fortunate enough to get hired, and then fortunate enough that that actually rolled over into a full-time job about a year and a half later when I graduated. But that experience was transformative, right? That's you go from what I'm getting in the classroom and learning all the different pieces. Again, as a 30-year-old, learning what a media planner was, I had no idea what that was at that age. But then being at a large agency in a big strategy department.
So you worked on commercials in your past career. Did you ever think or did you try to just break in without the master's degree or did you just go all in?
Yeah, the film path was more on the just purely the film side. So you would be
Mhm.
the track there would be a director of commercials if you're in that area. Uh,
Yeah.
I just
But
went and
you went to the master's route to be a strategist. Did you know you want to be a strategist getting into the John Steele novel makes sense, right? If you like that book, heavy strategy book about the strategy. So that
I
probably caught your eye.
I would tell friends like one there's a this is me. There's a bar in Seattle, Washington. I think it's called the Cyclops. It's right next to one of those Ace hotels. One of my favorite bars in the entire world because in the summer you can sit there and you get this confluence of people from 3 different neighborhoods walking by. And I just love people, just overanalyzing, figuring out what's going
Strategist.
on,
Say no
loo-
more. You're a strategist.
looking at trends, looking at what they're wearing, look at the bags, the shoes, and that was the thing that I always loved. And when I saw the John Steele novel, it just was, or book
Mhm.
rather, it just kind of crystallized that that's what I wanted to do. So I was unlike a lot of our students now in that I went in there saying I want to do strategy. I
Now,
mean,
this is interesting. I want to pause it here and ask you if you were doing this today and you were trying to break in today, what would you do? I mean, there's a lot of resources out now. Is the master's degree is that the right route to go at this day and age if you're doing this right today, the same thought process?
I think it's relative to your background, right? So I wanted to get into the agency world and I had no advertising experience. I didn't take a single advertising class in undergrad. So the master's made a lot of sense to me. Can you do this without a master's? Of course, most people do. And so go the undergrad route and try to specialize. Find the area that you want. My biggest advice to people is by your junior year, if you don't know what you want to do, find someone that does know what they want to do and figure it out. Sit
Hmm.
down with a professor, sit down with a senior who
Call me
feels
up.
like, who call them Chino, who
No,
knows
that's serious.
what they want to do and talk through that because when you find the thing that you're passionate at, all those doors start opening because you're interested in getting them open, right? If I, again, no offense to media, right? But if I went down the media route, I don't that's not what I want to do. I wouldn't be excited in tracking down people and setting up
Yeah.
interviews and working in internships. But I love strategy and I was just deep in the weeds. So
There are ways, and like this question I'm thinking about now, instead of the master's is going to be it's a high barrier, but high effectiveness. It will work. You go to UT Austin, I believe probably, does the University of Florida have a master's?
yep.
You go to never mind about UT Austin. You go to University of Florida, you get the master's, or you go to like a VCU or wherever. There's other routes too, though. There are like these mini courses and programs you can read, and you can like get caught up and create your own little curriculum. Julian Cole, Mark Ritson, Mark Pollard. These are influencers that are great strategists that I think you can, with your, because your scenario was you had some great experience just in general in life, and you had that natural curiosity. Like today, I think you can probably squeeze it without doing the masters. It just takes
Um,
that, like, it takes discipline and structure. Not a lot of people have that, and I certainly don't. Like, I would need to do a master's degree program. I'm doing one right now, so that's like why I'm doing it. But yeah, just wanted to kind of
Yeah, no,
brainstorm there.
I think that outside effort is what separates you, right? Like, so I told you I've directed people to your podcast. I directed people to Mark Pollard, to Julian Cole, to Kevin Forrester, to all these people that are supplementing the stuff we're trying to do. Find the area you want to be in and go all in. But you're not going to
Mhm.
want to go all in until you find that area. And I think too often in times students and even adults, find
Yeah,
themselves in the wrong department at the agency because they just didn't ask enough questions early on.
right.
And they wake up one day and they're like, I never wanted to be a strategist. Why did I do this?
And I'll tell you what, and Dan, the first job also is tough. Like sometimes there are people that graduate or they need to switch and just get into something, and that's perfectly fine too. Like take that like sales role that you hate. Like if you have to have the money and you have debt, and we didn't get the $10,000 approved by Supreme Court, not political podcast. Um, I'm just saying, like people sometimes financially just need to take these jobs and do it,
Mhm.
do the bare minimum, and then study and like figure out a path to get out of it. I get that too. Your first job doesn't define you for sure.
It doesn't. And there are so many overlapping skills, right? Like
Yes. There's always a narrative.
I would argue that you could go to the University of Florida. I would love it if you did. We have a great program. You can take my account management class. I promise you it will help prepare you. But I
Yeah.
also promise you if you go around the corner to a restaurant and are the best server at that restaurant, you're also prepared to be an account manager. If you know how to deal with people and you know how to problem solve in a communication environment, to your point, you don't there's a lot of other ways to get the necessary experience that's going to set you up to do well in advertising. This is a
It
people business.
it's a
It's a
people business.
communication business.
You need, but when you go to University of Florida, you're tapping into the large network, you're tapping into the great professors, access to so many resources where it's almost handed to you if you want to just go and take it. The supplemental things are there to get you really, the way I frame it too, Dan, if you get a degree from the University of Florida, you're going to get a job, a good job. No, like eventually, in maybe it might be a year, depending on if there's a global pandemic in 2020, like it was for me. Talk about bad timing. You're going to get a job, but the supplemental stuff, like we're talking about now, and building that narrative. I worked at Nordstrom, or you took Mark Pollard's strategy workshop, or Mark Ritson's, or Julian Cole's. Those things, and you work at the agency.
Yes.
Those things get you your dream job, or that ideal dream job at the time, and narrow it and give you a choice later on.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. We have some amazing students that come through here. I'm constantly at awe at the amount of effort and how bad they want to work in this business. And
And they got into University of Florida. It's not an
yeah,
easy school to get into.
it
Like,
isn't. No, it is.
no, I mean, you got some smart kids that are just naturally the, the hard. Somebody already like in the higher system was like, this kid's going to be good somewhere.
Yeah, one of the reasons that I came to the University of Florida is this is my sixth year, and
Nice
when I
weather.
went, it is nice weather. When I came here, they had this big push for five is what it was, and that was to be a top five public university. And
Yeah, it's gotta be
as part of that, the University of Florida hired 500 new faculty members in 2 years, and
500.
five hundred
Everything's
two hundred
super
and fifty a year for 2 years.
nice.
And that helped with our student teacher ratio. That helped bring in a lot of expertise in other areas. And we got there. This is our second year in a row of being a top five university in terms of public institutions. And the university has a huge commitment to growth and to moving our students forward and preparing them.
I bet you most our listeners are probably not University of Florida people. They're probably somewhere else that need extra help, right? Or like just need some extra guidance.
Yeah.
But you're going to be bringing in some great Florida listeners. So, and they get extra credit actually. We talked before, Dan will be giving everybody 5 points extra credit for listening to this podcast and rating it too on Apple Podcasts, saying I did this for extra credit, 5 stars.
There we go. You also have to sign up for ADV 3403. That's ADV 3403.
It is an advertising podcast, Dan. We got to throw in some plugs somewhere, right?
Oh, there we go. Exactly.
So you were an intern at 32 years old. We didn't even talk about that. I mean, just give me I know we're getting close to time here. What was that like, breaking into advertising and being a little bit older? Did you fit right in at GSD&M? Give me the cliff notes about that starting out.
It was awkward from my perspective. I felt like I fit in, but you
got kids telling you what to do. You got people 10 years younger telling you what to do. You're like, I'm not.
You just internalize and recognize that you might be the oldest person that's in that internship pool. But once I was there, it was a great learning experience. And I encourage students to get whatever internship you can.
And that's a great one too.
And in my role of working with interns, we have students who are interns at large agencies in New York or Chicago. We have students who get great internships here in town in Gainesville. And if you are getting a lot of the same skills, then you can use that as a stepping point to whatever's next in the world. Oftentimes, I think students look for just the New York City agency, which please go for that. They're great. But often, if you get that first internship in town at a smaller agency, you can parlay that into a bigger agency and a bigger agency. It goes for
first job too, not just internship.
It's a great point. Yeah. I often encourage my students to look at LinkedIn, which I think is the best stalking platform in the entire world.
My number 2 favorite brand. I just did my first assignment. Number 3 is Apple. Number 2 is LinkedIn. Number 1 is Costco.
Costco. Oh my gosh. We do not have a Costco in Gainesville. So you need
no, it's okay.
So painful.
No, I just respect the brand. But I love, keep going.
What I love about LinkedIn, especially when I think of students, right, is go find that job that you want in 5 years. Let's say it's, at Havas, it's at McCann, it's at Leo, it's at Wyden.
You just stop at Havas.
Okay, let's stop at Havas. Go find that person that's that account manager with 5 years experience. They're relatively close to you. Then look at LinkedIn and look at every step that they have documented that helped them get there. From the time they graduated college to whatever internships they took, to whatever first job, whatever second job, most people have a path. Yep. And we love talking about it. And those paths can be enormously instructive as you think of what your own first step is going to be. How do I get to Havas? Well, first I start working here, then I work there, and then all of a sudden I'm ready to go.
You can copy their path too. I did that. I just was like, I want to do exactly what you did. If it worked for that person, it might work for me. How do I do? Yeah. Or you start a podcast and you interview them and they eventually hire you.
There you go.
And I can help out with that too.
But yeah, so I think LinkedIn is an amazing tool for learning about the business. I have an assignment in one of my account management classes where I'll print out a pretty detailed LinkedIn profile from someone who's been in the business for 20 years. And I just tell students, okay, circle every word or phrase you don't know. If you don't know what KPIs are, circle it. If you don't know what this is, circle it. And we're going to look it up. All right. Now let's start looking up what these terms are. I mean, that's one way to get smart, right? To be in the weeds and to be really passionate about what you want to do. You got to know these terms. You got to speak the language. You got to want to understand. I've been out of strategy for 5 or 6 years now. I'll see a LinkedIn profile and a strategist will say something. I have no idea what they're talking about. Cut and paste, put that in a browser.
No, that's great.
That's how I stay smart.
Yeah. And what I would do a lot when I was a student, if I saw an ad and I would observe, maybe there's a little strategy within me. If I was in a room full of my friends and they were laughing at an ad, they would always look at me. Gino, who made that? Why is that ad good? We laughed. And they would they would wait for my reaction. And I always say, hey, if the ad makes you feel better about the brand after you see it's a good ad. That's always my take. And then second thing I would do is take a note and then I would go on my phone and go, who made that Chewy commercial, that dog food commercial? Oh, that's Arnold. Arnold's a part of Havas. They're located in Boston. Go to LinkedIn, invite them on my podcast, bring up that commercial that they made. Say, hey, I'm looking for an internship. Boom.
There you go. You're stealing
Yeah.
all my trade secrets, Gino. Exactly. I could
Yeah.
not agree more. In a previous teaching job in Chicago, I this was when the Allstate Mayhem campaign came out. The very
Leo
first,
Burnett.
yeah,
Yep.
that first came out, and I was like, man, I wonder who made that. And of course, it was a Leo Burnett, and of course, there's the ECD group creative director, and I'm like, no, somebody junior came up with this. And I spent, oh man, it must have been a couple hours finding out the guy who was the guy behind the idea. And he was probably 23 years old. And I tracked him down through news articles.
What was
And
his name?
I
You
don't
don't remember?
remember. I don't remember.
Well,
No,
we'll follow up. We'll
but
follow up.
I sent an email to him. I found out his Leo Burnett email address. And I
Nice. Because
said,
once you know one, you know
yep.
all the structure.
And I said, I was at DePaul University. And I said, DePaul students love mayhem. And it just came out. And I'm like, you want to be a guest speaker? And he loved it. And he was a rock
Absolutely.
star. But it was just, and I told my students, like, this is how you make connections. Like,
That's
you
it.
really get into the weeds, exactly what you were talking about. Cross reference A to B to C and make that
Hey,
connection.
and as a student, if you, this is like maybe one of my most controversial takes, but it's not. I will die on this hill. If you can offer value to that person as a student, you're going to be above and beyond. For me, it was inviting them on the podcast, giving them some publicity. But you have the agency, hey, we wanted to just do, we actually already did this for you. We did like a quick report. I know you're working on Allstate, and this is what Gen Z currently thinks from, and boom, you send them in a report. And oh, and by the way, I'd love to chat about it.
Yeah.
If you can do a little extra, some people are like, no, you don't, you shouldn't be expected to do that. Everybody should just throw it back and be, no, I'd say well, then go above and beyond.
Yeah. Or just be curious about their past, you know?
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
at the very least, they want to talk about themselves.
they do,
Yeah,
exactly, and
yeah,
they want to get in the weeds, and they just love that you recognize that it takes an army to do these things. It's not just the ECD that's in charge of
yeah,
the creative output, right?
and that's a good
Um,
strategy going like a little bit lower too, and because they identify, they're like, okay, I just broke in, but as they get higher up, they forget and stuff.
oh yeah, I always encourage students go 5 years, 5 years max. People higher than that are just really, really busy, and
Yeah,
they're not going to have as relevant of advice 15 years out. That's totally different than what it is today.
and what you said about 5 years out, I think it will be the last thing, because the networking needs to start early. So that's why I kind of preach like figuring out early on what you want to be, knowing where you want to go, making those connections early, because you just never know hiring and firing of clients and agencies. They couldn't, like, you could be the perfect candidate at the perfect time. Sorry, you could be the perfect candidate, have, the best connections, you are best friends with, you could be the son or daughter of the president of WPP, Mark Reed's kid. And if there's not a job opening, you're not going to get a job.
Yep.
Like, it's just like, if they lost a big client, let's say Wyden loses Nike and they to Havas Chicago, it's not a thing. Maybe one day. You're not gonna
Aim
get a
high,
job.
right,
You're not gonna
Chino?
get a job at Wyden.
Yeah. No, I think that's exactly right. Yeah,
Starts early. Starts
yeah,
early.
yeah, and just focus on understand what some of the big skills are in this business. And the number one thing that I'll say is that you have to be able to communicate. Like, this is a
Yep.
communication job, and college is a great opportunity to do the things that you're scared to do. We mentioned this earlier with the agency.
Yeah.
I'll say it in a classroom. If you don't like asking a question in front of 100 people, raise your hand and try it, because I promise you, the next time you do it, you're going to be better. Like, find your voice, start speaking up,
Love it.
start asking questions. That will propel you on the way to all of a sudden when you're like, I could do an informational interview. I'd love to
Yeah.
talk with that Gino guy.
They could always start with me.
There we go.
Everybody. But yes, Dan, how can people reach out to you if they have any questions they want to transfer and take your account management certificate, course, track? How can they do that?
I'm at the University of Florida. Email's easy to find. It is dwindels, Windels at ufl.edu. But you can just look
Nice.
up Dan Windels. You'll find it everywhere. Follow me on LinkedIn. I'll gladly follow you back. Send me an email and we'll chat.
Wonderful. Well, Dan, thank you so much for coming on. You did an amazing job, as I expected.
Nike to Havas. I'm waiting for that. Let's go.
Let's go.